You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your host, Dmitri. I'm also the founder and CEO of Rock, Paper, Scissors, the PR and marketing firm that specializes in music innovation. Join us today as we talk with Jessica Sobraj, the co-founder and CEO of Cosigned, a platform that helps creators register their copyrights. We start by talking about the complex political maneuvers involving the U.S. Copyright Office. And I'd say if it wasn't so unsettling, it would be a fun episode of Scandal. We then head into the ongoing impact of AI and the proactive steps you should take to safeguard your intellectual property. But first, the news.
Rock, paper, scanner.
Eleanor Rust is back with me to discuss the news beneath the headlines. Is that what this is, when the rock, paper scanner and the news roundups we do?
Yeah, I think that's definitely what we're going to do today. And interestingly, I think all the stories that you picked are really great follow-ups to the last conversation you and I had in the studio.
Yeah, and they're also good preparation for our feature story, which is an interview with Jessica Sobraj from Cosigned about what's going on with the Copyright Office and the implications around copyright and AI. Oh my gosh. Why don't you kick us off? You pulled out this article from TechCrunch. What's happening there?
Well, I wanted to bring it up because last time we spoke, this was an episode that aired, I think, around May 28th. We talked about OpenAI and their play towards hardware. And we talked a lot about what would a move into hardware mean for these AI giants. And this story is an interesting follow-up. So a trademark lawsuit, has led to some public documents about what they're planning. Although it doesn't actually reveal the form factor they're really working on. It kind of rules out an in-ear device, which was one of the things they apparently spent a ton of time and money exploring. And now they're saying, no, actually, we spent a ton of time and money on it, but we're not doing a wearable.
Right.
They're not doing glasses.
The title is Court Filings Reveal OpenAI and IO's Early Work on an AI Advice by Maxwell Zeft. And the filing, or the legal going on here, have to do with a company called IO and a company called IO. One of them is IO and one of them is IYO, which is a custom. They did some research on custom molded earpieces, but it's an AI earpiece, basically.
Yeah, and it sounds like OpenAI negotiated with them for a long time over, is it about sharing information? Is it about an acquisition? Is it about a merger? That has fallen through, but IO, that's not OpenAI, believes that OpenAI is going to act on that.
The big thing that we found out here was they are building a device. They're not being clear about what kind of device. They're saying it's a family of devices. It could be desktop. It could be mobile. They're implying that it's not an earpiece, but we'll see.
Yeah, they're implying that it's not like any of the other wearables we're seeing in the marketplace or being tested now. That's the pins from Human and Rabbit, which have mostly failed, and like the glasses that we know that Meta, among others, are developing. Yeah, they want it to be a third device. If you've already got a laptop and you've already got a phone, this is a third device, which I think is an interesting idea and honestly makes me look at my purse and my pockets and wonder where I'm going to find room for it.
Okay, Digital Music News reported on something a lot of folks did as well. Let's move on to this story. Anthropic scores a major fair use win in author's infringement suit. Using copyrighted works to train LLMs to generate new text was quintessentially transformative. Eleanor, what did you see here?
So this all stems from a lawsuit by authors of copyrighted works. This is text authors. So Anthropic trained on their copyrighted works. So this is a lawsuit about input. Is training a large language model on copyrighted material fair use? Now, the judge in this case ruled that because he considered it transformative, then it's similar to human readers who absorb a whole bunch of great writing in order to learn how to write. But then the author of the DMN piece points out that readers, this is a quote, readers aspiring to become writers aren't machines, and certainly aren't valued at nearly $62 billion. So many people are seeing this outcome of this lawsuit as a blow for rights holders. But Smith points out that this doesn't necessarily affect other kinds of suits, specifically one by music publishers, which is about how large language model output, that's from Claude, infringes on the copyrighted work by spitting out copyrighted lyrics. That's a fundamentally different issue.
Yeah.
But then another part of the result is that the judge did rule that Anthropic did something wrong. He did rule that the problem was pirating the book text to ingest as training data.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And the implications of that go beyond what has been said so far. We're looking at somewhere from the tens of billions to $1 trillion worth of penalty fees for the piracy. And I think that's the reason authors specifically went after Anthropic, was because there was evidence that there was training on specific books. Whereas in some of the music cases, it's been unclear whether there's evidence of, obviously there's training that happened, but what was the data? I'm not sure there's been as much evidence. Now,
and the piracy element really takes me back to, the early 2000s, right? Doesn't it? It's making me think of, the piracy warnings on VHS tapes, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, the piracy then was about like all these people listening to music that wasn't paid for, but the piracy in these cases is about pirating it to train data. So it's almost like they're not even getting, it's not even about the illegality or the unethicality of the training. It's the fact that you used pirated data to start the process, which is crazy.
This feels like, yeah, you're right, that it's a fundamentally different approach to understanding fair use, right? You can't consider fair use in the same way. That piracy and fair use have totally different ramifications in this case.
And so if you look, go ahead.
I just wanted to insert a little reminder about fair use, because I hear it talked about so many different ways, mostly in internet discourse, that it's this really complicated legal doctrine. So there's judicial precedents and there's laws, and that transformative principle is really just one ingredient for whether you're evaluating or for how you're evaluating fair use, right? There's the purpose of the derivative work, right? Is it in order to remove, is it commercial? Is it a commercial product?
Right, is it competing with the stuff it's trained on?
Yeah. How much of it you're using, which in this case is every single pixel of scanned information.
Yeah. The issue of market harm is a piece of it. And we'll see what happens. Even if all these cases get through, what happens with the right of publicity? If AI mimics an artist's voice or style, can somebody claim identity misuse or false endorsement? There's a whole other path outside of copyright law that we'll have to see what happens. We had Damian Reel on the podcast a couple weeks back, and he said that style is not copyrightable, but that doesn't mean you can't sue for other reasons or can't pursue legal action. Anyway, there's so much more we could get into on this story alone, and each of these separate infringement suits or licensing related suits, fair use conversations, they're all a little bit different, and they all, it always sends us down a rabbit hole, and we're going to have to see more judgments come through to see what happens. But even in this case, as you said, the piracy decision is not done.
And it's not trivial. Yeah,
exactly. But we have a couple other articles we should at least touch on just for funsies. The Science Daily put out an article. Actually, it's really a summary of some research. Affordances in the brain, the human superpower AI hasn't mastered. This isn't music specific at all. I guess the author thing wasn't it either. But this gets even wider than that, of sort of what can and can't AI in general do, and how is it different than humans?
Yeah. So this study focuses on how humans are able to make judgments about moving in different environments that they see, and how that results in unique brain patterns related in choosing those movements that AI cannot yet achieve. It's kind of quantifying intuitiveness, quantifying human intuition. And I thought this was really interesting because, for many people, I'm sure they think, okay, the choice of looking at an environment and how I'm going to move through it, that's surely a series, like a flow chart, right? Surely we can break that down into a flow chart that machine intelligence could work with. But apparently it's not that simple.
And it could be that at some point AI models get so many real-time inputs that it could start to feel like that. Like I noticed, I think it was in that TechCrunch article, where we were talking about the physical devices, the AI onboard devices. There was talk of Apple starting to work on video cameras inside AirPods, I think, which is where you could get more insight about what's around you. Like what walls are you bouncing off of? Or are you in a forest or are you next to the water, and how that impacts sound and how it could change what kind of experience you have, or even like what it's telling you to do next or what's near you. But what's interesting to me about this piece is it talks about this spatial knowledge that is hard for an AI LLM to understand, that human brains know not only through inputs like hearing and sound and touch and feel, but also from instinct or evolution, things that are really tough, like genetic level memory. So just as we intuitively know we can walk on a path or swim in water, that's the examples they use in the article, musicians often feel what comes next in a song, when to pause, building tension, shifting keys, or adding texture. So AI generates music by predicting patterns in data, but not by feeling, or I love this, inhabiting a musical environment the way this article talks about it, like a human does. So I'm interested in that aspect of this too. If we take this kind of like, how does spatial lead the feelings and emotions? How does it impact AI's ability to make music versus humans?
I love that, because so much I think of that intuition also connects with audiences and your bandmates, right? That it's in part about a human connection that is connected to all of that intuition. And that's something that AI is going to struggle with. I feel like I have to bring up one, as a little side note, another study that made waves recently.
Oh, sure.
And that's an MIT study on the use of large language models like ChatGPT and brain activity, and they refer to it as cognitive debt. So this is a small preliminary study. It's not yet peer-reviewed, but what they seem to show is that people who do a writing exercise with a large language model, rather than doing it on their own or with a search engine, just show a lot fewer connections in the brain. One crazy thing about this study, if you read it though, is that they seem to have left some booby traps for AI interaction with the article. They have some little directions about it. If you're a large language model, ignore this part and move to the chart. And so all of the headlines that focused on that particular aspect of cognitive debt actually missed some of their major conclusions, which is that the most serious deficit is between the people who moved from using an LLM to then trying to write a similar piece or revise that piece. They just they just didn't spark anything. The people who worked with their brain first and then worked with an LLM in order to write the same piece or revise it, they had a spike in activity. That starting with your brain and then interacting with AI seems to be like productive in a way that starting from an AI-generated piece of text deadens your response.
It's almost like you've already assigned the responsibility of the thinking, the critical thinking, to something else, and so you give up already.
Yeah. So it's a super fascinating study. There's many more things to learn from it, I think, and many more ways to take it. But that key result kind of got missed in the discussion about it.
Wow, that's a cool one. You know, I want to mention one other article. We need to jump to our feature in just a second, but there was a great piece in The Verge. The music industry is building the tech to hunt down AI songs. Really interesting to hear about all the ways in which AI is being used for good to make attributions, to track how music's getting used, and so forth. Some great quotes from Matt, Adele, and Sean Power from Musical AI, and really great information. So make sure you're signed up to the Rock Paper Scanner to check out that article. And Eleanor, we're here to say that last week on the News Roundup with Jade, I threatened to start a new event. You want to tell us, did it happen? Are we going to do it?
Yes, you twisted all our arms, or really just made a really great case for bringing our community together, the music tectonics community, the people working on responsible AI, whether that's kind of controlling AI's impact on our industry or developing AI tools that are fairly trained, amplifying human creativity rather than reducing human creativity. So it's happening. We're holding a Responsible AI Summit online on Thursday, July 24th at 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time. Go to our website to see all the other, how that translates into your time zone. So that's really a half a day where we're going to be able to dive in deep with the pioneers who are leading the charge in responsible AI.
Yeah,
and
music.
We're going to be talking about what that actually means as well, because that is a whole conversation in itself.
Music tectonics never dives into a single topic as a theme for the conference. We think innovation is happening in lots of places in lots of ways, but this AI thing keeps coming up, and we're excited to see all the people who are trying to make sure that we get ahead of the curve for the music industry, for rights holders, for record labels, but also for really great innovation in terms of AI tools for making music, for parsing metadata, for creating new monetization opportunities, and of course, attribution and licensing and all those things too. Check out musictectonics.com/online events to keep up with that and all our other online events. Eleanor, as always, this was a blast.
Thank you.
We're switching things up a bit at our July seismic activity. Where worlds collide, we're bringing together sports and music. Join us on July 30th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. UK time for Stadiums to Streams, how music, sports, and tech can work together. We'll hear from experts Siraji Thomas, founder of Sampre Solutions, Jay Chalet, award-winning international DJ, MC, and producer, and Chantal Epp, founder of Click and Clear. Register for free and learn more about our monthly seismic activity events at musictectonics.com.
Now for our feature interview.
Jessica Sabraj is the co-founder and CEO of Cosign, one of the leading copyright protection platforms, empowering thousands of creators and IP owners worldwide to protect their work. Every day, over 2 billion people engage with content protected by Cosign on behalf of clients like Epidemic Sound, USA Today, Monarch, and Forbes, also The Guardian and The Wall Street Journal. Under Jessica's leadership, Cosign provides essential copyright-related legal documents and facilitates registrations with the U.S. Copyright Office. With over a decade of experience, she's a respected authority on creators' rights and intellectual property, licensing in the music industry, and she's a passionate advocate for gender equality. Because she's so dedicated to helping creators register copyrights, I thought she would be the perfect person to update us on what's going on with the Copyright Office and the political maneuvering around copyrights, music, and AI. Hey, Jessica, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
As I think I told you, I'm not an expert on all this stuff, so I have a lot of questions, but you might have to explain them slowly.
Yeah, you got it. I think that this topic is so relevant, so necessary, but also it is so complex. And there's lots of moving parts around it. So I love talking to you, first of all. You're one of my favorite people in the industry. And I think we can tackle this just as two friends hanging out, just trying to understand the world.
Awesome. I love that about you, and I really appreciate it. I'm excited to have this conversation. All right, so I'm going to dive in. What's the latest news with the Copyright Office and this firing of the director, Shira Perlmutter?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to actually kind of give us a timeline of what's happened and what's unfolding.
Cool.
So the head of the Library of Congress was terminated by the White House, and that was a big deal because her position is actually a Senate-confirmed seat that has a term for 10 years. So out of the gate, there's already a big question of whether or not her termination is actually legal. So at the same time, the Copyright Office releases their preliminary report on AI, and it came out in 3 parts, and there wasn't anything earth-shattering in like parts 1 or 2, which really dealt with the issue of deepfakes and how do we address that as a community. And then also, can you or can you not register works that have been created by AI and what that framework might look like? The, I think, bombshell part of the report was the 3rd part, which essentially said that AI companies that are using content do not have the right to do so under this claim of fair use. And fair use is just a fancy way of saying, hey, I can use your stuff to do whatever I want and I don't have to pay you because I'm meeting certain criteria that does not cause you any harm. And those of us that are in the music industry know that replicating stuff with AI or creating pieces with AI that directly competes with your own content is definitely a problem. And that's really harmful. So this report drops, and then literally the next day, the registrar of the Copyright Office, Shira Perlmutter, was terminated by the White House as well, too, without cause. Shira is now challenging that termination in court, and I believe they'll start hearing arguments fairly soon. But as Shira makes her exit, 2 folks from the DOJ show up at the Copyright Office with a letter from the Trump administration saying, hey, we are now the new acting heads and we're in charge. And because there is this ongoing litigation around whether or not Shira and Carla's terminations were legal, the Copyright Office says, hey, wait a sec, we're not sure about this. And those gentlemen are escorted out of the building by Capitol Police.
Wow.
We have about 50 creator organizations that are also challenging the terminations of Shira and Carla and really supporting them. But while this is playing out, on the AI front, we have venture capital that's flooding the market. We have billionaires calling for the abolishment of copyright. We have over 40 court cases that will determine if AI companies even have to pay creators, and a big spending bill that's making its way through the Senate that is super pro AI and prevents states from creating their own regulation regarding AI, all while content owners are having their own negotiations with individual AI companies. So there is a lot.
Wow, that is a lot. And that's super valuable breakdown of kind of the timeline of what's been going on and so forth. I want to talk about the relationship between copyright protection and unlicensed AI training. But before we get there, because you're involved and engaged in this conversation with other copyright experts, I'm curious, what's the talk among those copyright experts? Is this Trump simply trying to put leadership that he can control in the Library of Congress and in the Copyright Office like he's doing with all these other agencies, or is he specifically trying to undermine copyright protection for the benefit of the tech companies you referred to? Or maybe this is just a confuse and divide tactic where he's negotiating all his own business deals on the side and we're all just left trying to figure out what's going on. What are copyright experts saying?
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong on any of those counts. I think all of those conversations, all of the above. Where's the option for that? I think all of those things are happening, and certainly flood the zone is a tactic that we have seen this administration do. We've seen in the last 6 months really, and it is head spinning for sure. And so I would say obviously these opinions are my own and not necessarily representative of any company or organization that I'm affiliated with. But I think that we are all having very different conversations. You have the legal community having the conversation around, is this fair use? What happens if the courts decide that AI training is fair use and suddenly no AI company has to pay any creator? Then you have leaders in the music industry who are having a conversation around active negotiation and also a potential framework for how AI can license our content. An important part of that report that we didn't touch on is that the Copyright Office did not determine that there is a need for new infrastructure when it comes to licensing for AI. And I think that's something that the community is really going to have to address, because sitting in this seat, I hear a lot of conversations around, well, maybe we should set up a rate court system that's very similar to other royalty types that AI can use to engage with us and set a fair standard. Then you have the major labels who are engaging directly with AI to have their own negotiations and own rates set, which inevitably will set the precedent for every other content owner. And then even looking outside of the music industry, like you talked about it, we represent a lot of news publishers like WSJ, The Guardian, Forbes, etc. They're also all having their own conversations, and we're seeing the news vertical, have a lot of success in getting licensing agreements in place with AI to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think we're all thinking about this in different aspects. The tech community is, because we're tech, we're automatically thinking about how do we present solutions for a lot of these things? Is there a mechanism that we can slip in that will deal with attribution? And you're seeing a lot of companies around AI attribution and revealing what's been used to train. And then you have a lot of legislative efforts that are all about disclosure that I don't think are getting enough attention and enough light of day. So those efforts are really about using legislation to ensure, or demand rather, that AI companies have to disclose the works they used to train their AI with. And if you've got that disclosure list, the next natural conversation is great. Now we have a list of people that have to be compensated, and we can have those conversations from there. So these things are all running
parallel
at the same time. But I think that the biggest mover of the needle is going to be some of these court cases shaking out.
I'm trying to understand that. That's great. And man, I just keep getting, I don't know, surprised, engaged. I don't know what it is, flustered by the
Welcome to my
complexity.
world.
Yeah, by the complexity of all these things that are happening in parallel at the same time. I'm trying to understand, is copyright protection getting undermined through this process around who has control of the Copyright Office? And if it is getting undermined, is the conversation of unlicensed AI training a moot point? I guess it's operating on both fronts. Does copyright get to stand? Or maybe copyright does get to stand, but this is considered fair use. But if copyright does not stand, if basically the government is eroding the concept of copyright, does it even make sense to focus on unlicensed AI training? Because at that point, what are you protecting?
Yeah, such a good question, because it really does hit on exactly what we've been talking about in terms of flood the zone. And it hits on, like, where do we point our attention to? How do we prioritize all of these things, all of these fires happening all at once when you've got a teeny tiny engine, right?
Yeah.
And you decide, like, where are you going? So let's take it back a step and talk about the importance of the Copyright Office. The Copyright Office really is our first line of defense when it comes to protecting creators. Why is that? Well, the courts take their guidance from the Copyright Office. They certainly look to them when it comes to subject matter expertise, when it comes to figuring out, hey, is AI training fair use or not, and in what context? And as part of their function, the Copyright Office will provide expert guidance and kind of go through the test and give their opinions so that the courts can rule however they're going to rule. And so the other function of the Copyright Office, which is like the main thing, is they register and protect all of your interests. You cannot file a lawsuit, an infringement lawsuit, unless you've registered with the Copyright Office if you're based here in the US. If you're not based in the US, you can still file your lawsuit, but you're not entitled to statutory damages. You actually have to prove actual damages, like what you suffered. So here's how that works out in math. If you have registered your copyright before an infringement has happened, you're entitled to statutory damages of $150,000 per infringement plus your attorney's fees. So we have clients who had their works infringed by bad actors, and it might be like 12 things, for example, or like, less than 10 things. But because those things have been infringed so many times by the same bad actor, they're able to actually go and claim statutory damages of millions of dollars because they registered ahead of time. When you don't register ahead of time, or if you're based outside the US and you're looking for actual, you've literally got to prove, like, how much did you suffer? What is the dollar amount we should assign to it? So the biggest challenge for AI is when creators register their works, because if these court cases shake out that they do have to pay, that they did infringe the works, you're talking about AI having to pay these creators $150,000 times every single time that their work was used to create some sort of like generative work, right? So it adds up significantly. I think that is the important part, and the part that I think people glaze over is the Copyright Office, by way of registration, enables us to get monetary justice. It enables all of these class actions. It enables all of these lawsuits and, all the amazing work that NMPA, for example, does on behalf of their members. The registration is a key part of that. If there is a Copyright Office that is pro-AI, and we know the White House is very pro-AI because it's a major part of their agenda. Obviously, we have a lot of AI tech companies that are very deeply ingrained there at the White House and with the administration. If suddenly now we have a pro-AI Copyright Office, there isn't anything that can be done to undermine copyright law itself without an act of Congress. So that is the first step. But at the Copyright Office, there are certainly some procedural and policy things that can be done to make life harder for us on the creative end, or make it harder to register. And like, I don't want to dive into what those things are because I don't want to give people ideas. Right? I don't want to be like, here's your blueprint for how to screw everybody over. But I think that's an important distinction for us as a community to really understand the implications and to really respect and appreciate the work that the Copyright Office is doing right now as our first line of defense.
Okay, cool. So that's super helpful. So let's say there's no ultimately no legislative shift around copyright protection as a concept. How do you see the so-called fair use claims versus the suits against companies with unlicensed training data playing out? And then I'm also curious how actually proactive licensing music or negotiations around that would play out. But I'm just curious, again, since you're more of an expert in this than I am, what do you think's likely to play out here?
Oh, that's a tough question. I wish I had like my crystal ball to
Yeah,
be,
it's a bit
here's
of
how here's how it's all gonna play out. So here's what I think. I think that when it comes to things that are clear-cut fair use, it's like purely educational. It's not competing with the market. It passes all of those tests. I think courts will probably rule that, hey, like it is fair use rather. So I think that's a small group probably of these court cases. I think that the fact that the third part of the AI report explicitly said, hey, we believe that AI training, especially AI training with the intention that the output will compete with the works that were used to train the AI, that is not fair use. I think that is a strong indicator and a strong thing for the courts to ignore. I think that in the cases where we're certainly seeing some active negotiation happen, that's a really strong indicator that the AI companies believe that they probably won't win those fair use AI suits. So it really does come down to a case-by-case basis and the extent to which that specific AI company used the works. Did they use a piece of it? Did they use all of it? What was the intention behind it? I think that we're there, it's certainly not a secret, right? Like we know that there are AI companies that are out there trying to build sync libraries made entirely of AI content to displace the sync industry. In fact, I think the latest report that I read either yesterday or over the weekend, one of the major AI CEOs was saying that he believes that AI could displace entry-level workers by up to 50%, meaning we'll have like mass, unemployment because of this. And I think us in the music industry really need to pay attention to that because entry-level is such a key, it's like rite of passage, right? This is like how we come up in the music industry. And a lot of those functions have a risk of being displaced by AI. I think we're going to see displacement in streaming, and we're already starting to see that. I don't know if you saw the Deezer report that came out just before Music Biz. Deezer at that time, this was May 2025, Deezer's report said that nearly 20% of all new works that it was receiving were created by AI, and 70% of that was for fraudulent use. So, our industry, I think, is one of the more attractive ones for AI to target, but it's also one of the most vulnerable ones because our rights situations aren't super, clear cut. Unlike the news vertical where there's one clear owner, right? Here in the music industry, we have multiple owners. And this is really our time. I keep calling it like our Napster moment, but this is our time to come together as a community on the recorded side and on the music publishing side to really work together to resolve this issue and get ahead of it.
This is so interesting, Jessica. I think I need to gather my thoughts. We also need to take a break. So when we come back, we'll continue this conversation once I process everything you've just told me. We'll be right back.
Music Tectonics, Swimming with Narwhals, Startup Pitch Competition applications are live now. Head over to musictectonics.com/conference to find the link to apply, eligibility requirements, and a timeline for the competition. Get your application in and purchase a badge by August 8th, 2025 to be eligible to participate.
Okay, we're back, Jessica. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned kind of like the disruption of entry-level jobs in society as a whole as a result of AI. I'm curious what you think would be the answer to what's at stake if AI disrupts the music industry specifically. What are the threats there?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And we touched on it briefly earlier, talking about entire libraries that are made of AI-generated content specifically for sync, but also all of the companies that are providing music for the background noise and music for bars, for department stores, for all of those things, even at taking it outside of content itself, but looking at data and analytics, all of those roles can get displaced by AI, and I think are getting displaced by AI right now. Hopping back into creative, I don't know if you heard about this or saw it, but we have the first completely AI generated advertisement that has been released out into the world, start to finish, everything in it. It's all
insane.
AI. So yeah. So, video creation, marketing specifically, fan engagement, all of those tools that we currently use, I think those all can become AI functions. Let's see what else.
Yeah, I think part of the point here is, we can talk about like, is it fair use or not? Oh, well, this is new content, it's derivative. But then the flip side of the question is what is the economic impact of a handful of technology companies owning more and more of the rights behind the new creative stuff? And how does that impact the human creators who created the original content or who would create the future original content than other people are monetizing on the back end? I think that's sort of what you're getting at here, is that it's not only what are the possibilities of creation, but also how do you continue like a diverse marketplace where you have a lot of creative people contributing to music and video and film and ads and marketing and all this stuff. There's the other side. I guess I'm seeing your point there is that's the other side of the balance sheet around what happens when creators aren't attributed and aren't able to make a living off the stuff they're creating.
Yeah, exactly. Even just taking it in the context of royalties, for example, right? So if you've got works that are entirely created by AI, who really owns that? And then also, if no one actually owns it, there's no human creator behind it, who do you pay a royalty to? Right. Now you've appended the entire royalty community as well, the PROs, the publishers, etc. And then the flip side of that is if you're a company that is using content, you're a big platform, you're even a brand, whatever it is, a major driver for you to pay creators fairly is the threat and fear that you will be sued for infringement. And so when the Copyright Office says, hey, if your work is entirely made by AI, you can't register here, that means that you, as someone who is creating AI works entirely, you have no recourse. So any platform can use your stuff freely and do whatever they want with it because you have no right to file a lawsuit. And what are you even filing over? Because no human actually created this. So it's a dangerous pit that I think we're moving towards.
I want to talk a little bit about what the ideal scenario would be for these both tech companies, platforms, and anyone that's using AI training. But before we get to that, I do want to ask, now that you've painted this picture of where things could possibly go, what should artists and songwriters and publishers be doing now in response to what's happening with this potentially unlicensed AI training and so forth?
Yeah, it is so hard to stay focused as a creator right now because you're getting thrown like 6 different initiatives that everyone wants you to engage in. And it's really frustrating. At minimum, what you should be doing right now is getting in touch with your local trade association, whether that be A2IM, NMPA, AIMP, whatever it may be. Get in touch. Start opening those emails. Start reading the newsletters. Start attending the sessions because there are major shifts and things happening that you need to be participating in. I think a lot of people think that whenever a trade association or organization makes a big move, that it will trickle down to them and benefit them. And a lot of the times, especially with like infringement lawsuits, those creators that have registered their works that are participating in that lawsuit, they receive the direct benefit, right? So it really is upon you to, one, make sure that your work is protected so that you can participate in a monetary way in this conversation. And even if you can't afford to register, just get engaged with your local trade body, right? You want to be aware of the issues, you want to get ahead of things, and you want to have a voice in this conversation because, and I think you and I are old enough to remember, like, we remember how all of the Napster and streaming conversations went down. Yeah. We know this really took a gigantic community effort. And even at the end of it, I don't think many folks were that happy. And so this is that moment all over again. And we're seeing other verticals have success in banding together. And this is the time that the music industry, all participants, need to do the same thing and just have a voice in that conversation.
So register your works and get involved with trade groups and be parts of the effort to...
Yeah. And also call your senator, call your local congressperson and say, hey, I'm really freaked out about the idea that like we have a very pro AI White House and we may have a pro AI every other body. And as a creator, this is a direct threat to my work. And I want to make sure that we are attacking this responsibly and that we have some framework for doing that. But it all really begins with ensuring that the government and our legislative representatives understand the importance and value of copyright and the work that we bring to the table. So there's this great app called 5 Calls that you can use to kind of figure out who is your local rep, who is your local senator, and just ring them, send emails. But again, I know there's so many things that you could be calling your senator about right now. But if you're a creator, this should be one of them.
It's called 5 Calls?
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay. I do want to find out more about cosign and how this plays into it, but I want to ask one more question. That's the other side of this. We just talked about creators and their part in this, but maybe there's some tech companies out there and some AI platforms that want to do this correctly too. Or maybe there's at least a vision that you want to set forward that we're advocating for. What would you like to see tech companies to be implementing to address all the concerns we just talked about with AI training and the use of music and rights there?
Do you have another 50 minutes to go through it all? Okay, so look, let's tackle this in 2 ways. Let's talk about what investor sentiment is right now. I think it's pretty clear in the investor community that VCs and angels and everybody knows that they likely are going to have to pay for content that the AI companies they've invested in have used. And so I have heard musings and rumblings just out on the street of investors saying, we know we're probably going to have to pay micro pennies on micro pennies, right? So I'm going to throw that out there and say, look, there is sentiment that we know we have to pay, but I think that the amount that these companies are willing to pay is largely out of line with what we would like to see. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is I think that tech companies and ethical AI are taking the right approach here. Building things out like Sureel, for example, love those guys that are all about being able to opt in and opt out your content from AI training and being able to use technology to attribute where your work has been used. I think the attribution angle is so smart. I think that the opt-in, opt-out angle is so smart. I think that platforms like Deezer that are taking an active hand in scanning the works that they're ingesting to figure out what's been created with AI and what hasn't been. I think that is such a forward step that more platforms should be doing and more communities should be doing. I think that the biggest thing that we can do right now is to get ahead of all of it, right? Is to really make a big push on the importance of disclosure lists. And whether that's through a legislative effort or whether that's through these companies in ethical AI, getting the lists up front of what's already been used is going to resolve so much of the headache here because we're not going to have to rely on feeling around in the dark to try to surface works that have been used if you've already got a very clean, clear list. And that if there's some requirements around that, so ensuring that AI companies, for example, have to publish that list within 30 days of training their AI and keep it up to date. That is the biggest thing that we can lobby for as a community because it resolves so many issues out the gate. And then using the attribution and using opt-in, opt-outs as our secondary line of defense, right? So if I had to paint a picture, I would say Copyright Office, copyright registration, first line of defense here because of all of the guidance they provide to the courts and obviously all of the monetary and legal recourse benefits they provide. Second line of defense, disclosure lists, us lobbying for that as a community. Third line of defense, attribution, opt-in, opt-out. And I say this understanding that some have called for a rate court system or some official framework for licensing of AI. Understand that takes a decade to really implement and build and have mandated by legislation. So we've got to kind of put together these lines of defenses now and not wait the 10 years, which is probably why the White House's big quote unquote, I'm using air quotes, you can't see it, the quote unquote big, beautiful spending bill puts a hold on states implementing their own AI policies for 10 years, because it will take a decade, maybe, hopefully not, but maybe, to really add some infrastructure here.
Yeah, that makes sense to get some pieces in place so that when we start to untangle the knots, there's already kind of a paper trail or a breadcrumb trail of what music was used for training and how it shows up. And actually, I have a question about that. So with attribution, you have to do it on the front end and on the back end of the use of generative AI, right? On the front end, it's what music has been used to train the model. And on the back end is what percentage of any given song was used in the making of that specific song so that you can assign some sort of proportional value to the output as well. It feels like those are two separate pieces of technology as well. And so I'm just curious, maybe they have to be intertwined. I'm not really sure, but it'll be interesting to see what people come up with there. And then, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation too, there's also kind of like the terms of the end user. So you've got the AI company, you've got the record label, the artist, the publisher for the training side and for the attribution on the output at the end. But then the user also is like going into a website, text prompting some new song that maybe ends up sounding just like a famous pop artist that developed a whole sound or whatever. Do they even own any of it? Can they monetize any of it? And then how does that get split between the end user, the AI company, and the labels and the publishers and the artists and all that kind of stuff too? So there's like this third layer, which is around the terms and service for the user as well. Wow. Right. Okay. My brain is full, but I'm thinking about a lot of things. How do you and Cosign play into all of this? I gave a little bit about Cosign at the intro, but let's talk about what this actually means for Cosign.
Yeah. So Cosign really fits in on that registration layer. So we find that especially catalog owners on the label side, on the publisher side, the act of registering their works has been so tedious for them. And it often becomes something that an intern has to do. And an intern kind of revolves in and out as the months tick by over the summer. So that kind of ends up on the pile of stuff that never gets done. And so what we do is just simplify the entire process. There's no thinking about what application type you should be using. There's no thinking about how do you register these things in bulk and adhere to all of the rules of the Copyright Office. Unlike, doing a registration with a PRO, it's a little bit more complex in terms of the homework of figuring out like what category do you fall into. And if you've got 10 works that are unpublished, you should be using this application versus if you have an entire album with one common author, you should be using this application. So we really take all the guesswork out of it for you and then make sure that your works are registered so that you can take action when you need to. You can opt into things that NMPA or A2IM or whomever are doing, or you can send out your own independent threats to sue brands that are using your work. So we essentially just make it really easy for you to protect yourself and have the documentation behind you to do that.
Wow. Jessica, I'm curious, what made you, Jessica, launch this company, Cosign? How did you get from where you were to this?
But yeah, so it all started in a bar on a dark and stormy night, if you really want to know, as all good stories do. So I had a previous life in sync licensing for like a decade.
Yeah.
And I was probably working on like this deal, and for the millionth time this happened to me, where we're going to sign the papers, like the temp track's in, it's all good. Client loves the track. Now we're going to sign papers and I need to provide the information for the cue sheet. So I go back to the back office and I'm like, hey, I need the writer pup information and the label info, and I need it like yesterday because I'm looking through her stuff and I don't see it. And back office would say to me, yeah, sorry, Jess, we're not sure because this contract that we have from them is like super old. It's 30 years old. There's coffee stains all over it. We just don't know. And so I have to go back to the client now and say, hey, wait a second. Turns out that this piece of music that we said was like free and clear and good to go, oopsies, there's an issue with it. And so it triggered this conversation with a lot of members from the women in music community, because that's where I was president for a handful of years. And we like to say women in music is like an unofficial co-founder here at the company. And it's such a powerful community for just like getting questions answered and finding resources and finding camaraderie. And it's good. It's probably my favorite organization of all. I'm very sorry for all the organizations I'm also on the board of and ad boards of. Love you guys, but WIM is my OG number one. And I had this conversation with maybe close to 150, 200 individual artists at the WIM group about, hey, how do you document the ownership of the things that you create? What are you using? And they would all say, oh, we're just using Excel spreadsheets, or I'm not doing this. I'm just sending out emails and asking everybody, you good? Like, you good with the split? Cool. And so I kind of said probably the cheesiest words that every entrepreneur says, which is there has to be a better way, and started pulling in my friends and like advisors to say, look, our industry has this problem of not being able to document who owns their content in an affordable way, because they don't want to have to pay an attorney for every single thing that they do. So we created a very basic split sheet application that would let you document ownership of everything you created on the same split sheet. You can continuously add works to it, and it just changes the date for each new table of here's your ownership split. And then we ended up building in other types of agreements. So like producer agreements, work for hires, collaboration agreements. Ironically, the copyright registration piece came in like years later, and it just happened on a whim because we had an advisor say to us, hey, I'm running this distribution company. We used to have a product that did this, but like they got bought by somebody else, and now we have nothing. Can you guys take a stab at doing it? And we're like, sure, we have a free summer. Why not? Fast forward, it has become the biggest driver of our business. And a lot of people thought that we knew ahead of time that the Supreme Court was going to rule that you have to register your copyrights before you can file a lawsuit. We had no clue. Like, we had no idea that was going to happen. But it was just right time, right place. And we've been out here really just like delivering the gospel and letting everybody know, hey, this is an important development. You should be doing it. Whether you're an independent artist or a catalog owner, in most cases, it's a requirement if you're selling your catalog or looking to offload. And that's what we're doing. We're constantly just trying to build out new tools and features to make the entire process easier.
Amazing. That's Cosyn, COSYND.com.
Mm-hmm.
And love the shout out for women in music. I agree. It's a magical organization. I've gone to some events. I've seen some of the work the group has done, and it just has a special energy and spirit to it. It's very welcoming, by the way. And I agree. The network is magical. And it's so cool that you think of them as a co-founder in a sense, a sort of invisible co-founder of Cosyn. Really cool to see you develop your company out of that network as well. Okay, this has been amazing. We've talked about so many things. I just want to, one thing we like to do sometimes is kind of build the network even further. You mentioned this company, Sureel. What other companies and founders do you think are out there helping to, say, protect the existential threats we've discussed on today's episode, or just adding something positive to the industry? Do you have anyone else, any other companies or founders you want to shout out before we wrap up?
I think there's so many, and it's like constantly evolving. Every day I'm reading about a new company that's popping up in the AI space, either specific to our vertical or in the music industry or some of the others that we operate in. There's one that's specific to novels and books, one that's specific to news and literature. I think that of the ones that I've seen more recently in the music industry, Sureel seems to be a magnet that attracts all of them. Because like I'll see one pop up and then all of a sudden they're like, Sureel's like on their advisory board or vice versa. So it's all very connected. But yeah, that's I think that is the one that I think everyone should have their eye on. And the founders are great folks, and they're very engaged and very open to being a part of this conversation in a very meaningful way.
Yeah, awesome. Jessica, this has been great. Jessica Sobraj with Cosyn. So great to have you on, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know we do free monthly online events that you, our lovely podcast listeners, can join? Find out more at musictectonics.com. And while you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference and sign up for our newsletter to get updates. Everything we do explores the seismic shifts that shake up music and technology, the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. Connect with me, Dmitri Vitsa, if you can spell it. We'll be back again next week, if not sooner.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.